10 funny mistakes in Swedish. I will share them today with you in this video. Let's start with the most common mistake while learning Swedish. If you want to improve your Swedish, you really need to stop making this mistake. So, the most common mistake is to not make enough mistakes. Yes, that is correct. In my experience as a teacher, the best students are those who dare to talk no matter what, even though they make many mistakes along the way. They focus on communication and not perfect grammar. And in most situations, they're still able to communicate. Let's look at an example so you understand what I mean. If you go to a coffee place in Sweden and you say in a sweet and kind way, "Jag bulle," instead of "Jag vill ha en kanelbulle, tack." Most Swedes will still understand what you mean, and you will still get your kanelbulle, even if you just say "jag bulle." And that is all that matters, that you get your kanelbulle. While those who don't say anything because they're too afraid of making mistakes won't get that kanelbulle. Or they will, but only if they speak English. But then they will lose a perfect chance to practice their Swedish. Because if you speak Swedish to a Swede and they notice that your Swedish isn't native, they will, in most situations, help you. Because they also want to be able to communicate with you. Maybe the Swede respond by saying, "Jaha, du vill ha en kanelbulle? Självklart. Här kommer den." By correcting you this way, they are already giving you some valuable information. Vill ha en kanelbulle. That's how I should say it, and not jag bulle. And this will improve your Swedish for next time you want to order en kanelbulle. But you wouldn't have gotten this valuable information if you spoke in English. So again, try to speak Swedish as much as possible, even though it means making some mistakes along the way. Today I will share with you some funny mistakes that Swedish learners have made. By making these mistakes, they have learned Swedish even faster and even helped others by sharing their experience. So let's start. Number 1. This first funny mistake comes from a fun Swedish student. She was also a teacher and she was teaching English to Swedes at a school here in Sweden. One day, one of her students had his schedule in his hand. She noticed that her student had written slut many times on his schedule. She confronted him and said that he should not be using that kind of offensive language in her classroom. The student was confused until he realized what had happened and explained to her that he had written Sleuth, which is the Swedish word and not the English word, slut. Sleuth in Swedish means end or finish. And he just wanted to write this on his schedule after every lesson so he could see better when his lessons ended. And due to this funny mistake, my Swedish student never forgot what the word sleuth meant in Swedish. End of story. Number 2. Next funny mistake comes from another fun Swedish student. He was having Swedish lessons with us through his work. One day in class, he told us about his first experience with Swedes. He found them to be very sweet towards him, since they always said hi to him and then called him son. Hey son. At least that was what he thought. Then, during his Swedish lessons with us, he realized that he had been misunderstanding it all. They didn't see him as their son. Hey son was just another way to say hey in Swedish. What a disappointment. We told him, at least they say hi to you. Not every Swede does that. Moving on. Like I said, we taught this student Swedish at work. Many nice companies have Swedish lessons as a benefit for the employees. So if you also want that, send our information to your HR or boss. Here's the link, where you can find all our information about our Swedish courses for companies. Hopefully we at Fun Swedish can provide you and your international colleagues fun Swedish. Vi ses kanske på ditt jobb. Number 3. Next funny mistake is a very common one. Mixing up han and Hoon in Swedish. A classic mistake is to say that you have a boyfriend when you actually have a girlfriend, or that you have a girlfriend when you actually have a boyfriend. Like one of our students said, "Jag bor med min sambo. Hon heter Tor." I live with my sambo. Her name is Tor. I mean, it could be true, but most Swedes would get a bit confused if you say this. A good tip to remember that han is he and hon is she is to think that Han Solo is he, especially if you are into Star Wars. And then maybe think about honey for hon, she. At least this is a tip that many of my students use. However, I must warn you that this tip doesn't work for the word honom. You would think that this is her, but no, honom is him. Very confusing, since it's very similar to Hoon, which means she. Anyway, here's a list so you can remember these words. Hoon, she, han, he, honom, him, henne, her. If you want to know more how these personal pronouns work in Swedish, then you should take our online video course for beginners. We talk a lot about this here and also practice it with many exercises. Number 4. Next funny mistake is actually not from a student, it's from my mom. She came to Sweden from Argentina when she was 25 years old. Her Swedish is excellent today, but to get there, she had to make many mistakes along the way. One was to say kliva på dig to people who were sick, instead of saying krya på dig. Krya på dig is how we say get well, something you would wish someone that is sick. Kliva is our word to say to cut something in 2 pieces, especially with an axe. It doesn't sound so good to wish this to people who are sick. But in the end, she learned the hard way. Another classic mistake my mom made was buying surströmming in the supermarket without knowing what it was. You know, this very smelly fermented fish that has become quite viral. My mom bought it, opened it at home, and then run away back to the supermarket demanding a refund because they had sold her rotten fish, and also upsetting all the neighbors for making the building smell like surströmming. So she learned about surströmming the hard way, and she actually got the money back from the supermarket and an explanation what surströmming was, which my Swedish dad clearly had forgotten to teach her about. Number 5. Our next funny mistake comes from another fun Swedish student. She was a student from the States with a Swedish boyfriend who used a lot of Swedish slang when he spoke to her. They had a long-distance relationship and she was studying Swedish with us while she was waiting to visit him. When they texted each other, he always used this word, bärs, especially when he talked about going to the bar. My student knew that bad was the Swedish word for berries, but she was a bit confused why her Swedish boyfriend always talked about going to the bar to get some berries. But she didn't question it, because she thought maybe it's a Swedish thing, since they do eat a lot of berries in Sweden. But then in our Swedish class, she learned the real meaning of bärs. Beers. It's a slang word for öl. For her, everything made more sense now, and we helped her to understand her Swedish boyfriend better. Number 6. Next funny mistake. Something similar happened to another student who had been saying Snig to babies and dogs, thinking that she was saying that the babies and the dogs were cute, realizing in a lesson when we explained the difference between söt and Snig, Snig didn't mean cute. It meant something more like handsome or hot. So when she had been saying "Du har en snygg bebis" to people's babies, it sounded like she said "You have a hot baby." Thanks to our courses, she stopped sounding like a pervert in Swedish. And if you want to know more about the differences between söt, snygg, gullig, then you should take this video course, where we explain it in detail. And talking about sounding like a pervert in Swedish, we have come to number 7. Another funny mistake was made by an American student who went out for dinner here in Sweden. The food was delicious, so she wanted to tell the waiter to give compliments to the chef. En jättebra kock. However, she mispronounced this word and said something that sounded more like kuk instead. Jättebra kuk, which means very good, pinsamt. You can say that she learned the true meaning of the word kuk by the reaction from the kock. Number 8. Next funny and common mistake was also made by another fun Swedish student before joining our courses. This was a Russian student who was talking about music from the early 2000s with some Swedes. Eminem came up. He had been listening to Eminem as a teenager, so he wanted to say that he knew about Eminem. So he said, "Jag känner Eminem." The Swedes couldn't believe it. They were impressed. "Do you know Eminem personally? How and where did you meet him?" Our student was confused, but then he realized that he should have been adding a till after känner. Jag känner till Eminem. This is how we say I know about Eminem. I know about his music. Jag känner Eminem means for a Swede that you know him personally. And when our student told us about this story in class, the rest learned as well. And he saved many from making the same mistake. This is why it's so good to confess and share your funny mistakes. Number 9. Next funny mistake. For some context, in some situations, you can create a Swedish slang word by using an English word and add an A to it. Like in these situations, to add, adda. To chill, chilla. So a student of ours used this logic. Sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. Like that time when he wanted to tell a Swede that most Swedes in Sweden were really fit. So he said, svenskar är fitta. By the look on the Swede's face, he realized that he had been insulting Swedes instead of giving them a compliment. So it sounded like he was saying that Swedes are or something like that. At least it's nothing good to say. Number 10. Our last funny mistake is also a sexual one. As many of you might know, when we sing the Swedish birthday song, we sing in the end a phrase that goes something like hip hip hurrah, 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 which is our way to say hip hip hooray, 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 hooray. A classic mistake that many beginners make, especially those who haven't taken our pronunciation course, is to say hora instead of hurrah. Hora is our word for whore. So instead of saying hooray to the birthday child, you end up saying that they are a whore. So if you want to practice this song and get that hurrah right, then you should sign up to our 100% beginner video course. Here's the link. Now, dear followers, do you have any funny mistake that you want to share with our Fun Swedish community? Feel free to write it down in the comment section below so we can learn from your mistakes. Because like we said, make mistakes and learn from them. That's how you will learn any language faster. I personally make them very often when I speak English or any other language. Like that time when I ordered a beard instead of a beer, or that other time when I ordered a bear instead of a beer.
No.
Så, that was all for today. Hejdå, nu är det slut!